Big Will from Heavy Hole Podcast, and today my guest is a guest that probably needs no introduction for most of our listeners, but I'll say it anyway. This is Mike DiSalvo of Acurian, and also formerly of Cryptopsy and Infestation and other projects. We'll get into it. Mike, how are you?
Excellent, man. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course, thank you for your time and welcome to Heavy Hole Podcast.
Awesome.
Yeah, like I said behind the scenes, I have a lot of questions, and you have a long and storied career, I should say, so we'll get into it. But before we get into the death metal, we always start from the top, so I'll hit you with the typical question. Are you from a musical family? Any musicians in your family, or anyone who steered you into heavy metal and hard rock music as a kid?
No, not really. I have a cousin that plays drums. He's younger though. I also actually another cousin. They're both from my aunt. She plays piano, and so yeah. So I mean, there is after the fact, I guess, some more musicians in the family, but before me, nobody. There was never a guitar in the house, never anything like that. So it was kind of just I had a huge allure to music as a kid. I had a cousin of mine who introduced me to a lot of like classic rock stuff. She would let me listen to her records, and that sort of, I'd say that really sort of set things straight for me in terms of certainly a love of music, but love of vinyl and experiencing new music, and that was a huge asset for my early learning experience of what I liked and what kind of bands I was interested in, and because a lot of it steeped in 70s classic rock, and that's really where it sort of blossomed for me.
Okay, and you're originally from Boston?
Yeah, I was born in Chelsea.
Okay, so now, I want to credit, you've done several interviews, and I always credit my research, and I try not to make you drag out the same story over and over again. So I want to credit Grizzly Media, Juice Pro Wrestling Podcast, Reaper Metal Productions, and Cali Death Podcast, and of course Metal Archives for my research. And as we go into that, I know that you have kind of a passionate love for old school hockey. That's fair to say, right?
Absolutely, man. I'm a fucking huge hockey fan. I'm a hockey fan anyways, but yes, old school hockey, 100%. Love it.
So that, I would imagine, is something that goes back to childhood, no?
Absolutely. I mean, some of my earliest memories, I actually remember being a kid and saying how much I liked number 4 and not even knowing his name, not knowing Bobby Orr's name. So that was shit, man. That must have been 3 or 4 years old, somewhere in that range. So, I mean, it is a very early on memory of watching the Bruins games against, especially games against Montreal and, Quebec and Buffalo back then too, maybe a little bit later, but certainly, New York Rangers and Chicago, all those Detroits. And, I do remember all those teams and, the early Vancouver, the Canucks, but before they were that, I think they were they the Rockies back then? I remember anyways, I do remember a lot of those like old school games, and that's certainly what I grew up with, was watching that and literally watching guys fight. So there was like puddles of blood on the ice. Like that's the type of hockey that I long for, fucking big time.
Yeah, I don't know if you have like a hatred for or a rivalry for the Islanders, because I'm Long Island here, right in the backyard, and I've never followed hockey particularly closely, but growing up in the '80s, the Islanders, the Stanley Cup, and it was like they were like a storied team, and it was a big thing
Absolutely.
for Long Island out here.
They were a tough team too, and they were a dynasty. I mean, they went 4 years in a row, and they had some tough motherfuckers on that team. Just Clark Gillies and Bobby Nystrom, and they were a tough team for sure. I don't, it's a team that I never had a dislike or really much of a care for. Like they're not a team that ever struck me like a Hartford Whalers or a Quebec or a Montreal. Certainly Montreal, I fucking hate. I hate that team. That team.
Well, don't you live in the Montreal area now, or are you at?
No, I'm back, man. I'm actually back. I'm in New England again. I'm in New Hampshire now. So.
Oh, okay.
So I was up there for 25 years. spreading the gospel of the Bruins
That's what I'm gonna say.
everywhere I went.
It's like the great irony of your life. A Boston guy who's into hockey moves to Montreal, and you hate. I mean, it's crazy, but you can't make that
Yeah.
up. Did you ever?
I like I said, I equated to like making friends everywhere I went in the city over there.
Well, did you ever get to go to like a Bruins game up there or anything like that?
Absolutely, several. Yeah.
And was
Lots.
it just like you and a handful of people in a pocket somewhere cheering on the Bruins, or?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, yeah. I've had guys talk shit. And, you know, you give it right back. And I had a guy at it was a playoff game. It was actually when Andy Moog was playing for the Bruins, and the Bruins were up actually. And I had this fucking guy sitting next to me, and the two of us had our like arms on the railing, and we were like right up on each other. It was like a fucking stupid cockfight, fucking for positioning in the seats, you know. And but I wasn't backing down. I was like, man, I'm gonna lean in on you all fucking night, you know. But you know, but it's and I say that I would never have started a fight or anything like that. But I say that it's just a you know, it's a rivalry, and sometimes it gets a little deeper. You know, certainly being in Montreal for all those years, almost every instance, everyone was fine and it was fun and it was, you know, it was a fun ride. You know, it was cool. I have had a couple of situations where people took it a little too far and then I play into it. I laugh. I'm just a total asshole back in laughing in their face and not to instigate much. I mean, not to instigate, certainly not in a you know, fighting manner, just to say, hey, you know, like, the rivalry's there, and you're taking it, a step further, and I'm certainly not going to cower and hide over it either. You know, so
it gets real in hockey. Hockey is a different beast than like your typical American sports. You know what I mean? It's yeah. I have family that relocated to Rochester, and you know, we go to but what's the Buffalo? The Buffalo, it was the Sabres. The Sabres, right? Yeah. I've been to a Sabre game years ago, and there's a I guess the Rochester team is like that's like the smaller league, right?
Probably their AHL affiliate.
Yeah. So I've seen all these, but it's a huge culture upstate and in Canada there, man. So I had to get a little talking about that, but kind of because I knew I heard you talk passionately about old school hockey, and we all know what that means. The you know, the gloves off fighting is part, because people might not realize this in hockey. I mean, I don't know if it's still part. Maybe you could clue me in on this a little bit, but like having an old fashioned fist fight was allowable in the rules. It was part of the game at one point.
Still is. Yeah, absolutely. It's literally the only sport you can fight and have a 5-minute penalty, be back on the ice 5 minutes later, and you know, continue your game. You could have, you know, I mean, back in the day, it used to be guys would fight 3 times a night. Sometimes, you know, off the bench brawls were, you know, regular enough. Anyways, I mean, every year you saw, you know, a couple times, anyways, in a year off the bench brawls, just from the Bruins, you know, and literally every guy's either standing off or you know, going at it. Like you know, sometimes you have like, you know, 8-10 guys going at it at once when you got 3 refs out there to try to break it up. So you know, so guys are getting shit beat out of them back in the day. It's just, you know, I grew up on it. I miss it. I think today's game, I you know, like, I love hockey, but I don't love it like I used to love it, because I think it is missing some of those things. And you do get like cheap, you know, some cheap shots when you get guys out there that, you know, might not be willing to fight, or even when they let them, you know, even when they drop the gloves at this point, they fight, and the refs are in breaking it up, you know, seconds later. It's rare that they actually let them go like they used to. They let them go 2.5 minutes and burn them out, and okay, all right, guys, you're done. You know, but now they're like, the second like somebody like grabs onto a jersey, it's like, oh, we got to break this up. And now, you know, it's still a 5-minute penalty, but you get in a second fight, chances are you might be tossed for the game. Sometimes you're tossed even just for like roughing. You know, a couple face washes, and guys are being tossed out with 10 minutes left in the game. They're tossed out for 10 minutes. It's just a totally different game now, you know, and it's a shame because you can have UFC, you can have boxing, you can have all these things, and this has always been a part of hockey. It always has been from the beginning of time, you know, since hockey began. And then you have a lot of people who came in and wanted to see it cleaned up, but it's not the people who are the real fans who are watching it. It's some outsider watching another sport, sees something they don't like, and we don't want to see this anymore, and then things change, and it's a shame because it always has been a part of hockey. And when you start to take those things out, you start to see a lot of other things creep back in, like cheap shots, like hits to the head, like whatever it might be. You'll see a lot more of that than you would see if someone's out there and if I deck this guy's coming after me. That's hockey. That is hockey, and the scoring and the other stuff. It's like the old adage of a hockey game broke out at the fight.
Yeah, but
Sweet, I love it.
I hear you. There's you mentioned MMA and even boxing. Like the whole point of hockey is like the fighting isn't the point. But
No.
if you go into this game under the assumption that there are certain situations where you just got to let these two guys scrap it out and handle it as part of the game, there's something to that. There's something old fashioned appeal to that. So, so now we'll probably get back into this too when we talk about later on in your life when you go to Montreal and being in a Canadian band, but being an American guy. But before we get into all that. Boston, back in the day, a man of your generation, people are thinking of maybe the old school hardcore punk scene. They're thinking of violent shows, skinheads, things of that nature. Dispel any of the mystery or the stereotypes or indulge us a little bit about what it was like coming up in punk and hardcore and metal back in what I would assume would be the 80s and early 90s.
Well, that's absolutely accurate. I mean, that all that stuff was going on. There was violence at the shows, unfortunately, because what you have, Boston's one of those sort of miracle scenes where back in the day, you had people that were metal fans, hardcore fans, punk fans, people that would go to the shows and everyone got along. There was no divisiveness early on. It did creep in. There was a Nazi movement of skins that had come in and were causing lots of trouble at shows, kicking the shit out of people. When you've got 20 guys, 25 guys deep, and you're there with 2 or 3 friends, and you get jumped, you're fucked. So we did see a lot of that shit. And there's another group who I will not name that had come in and sort of cleaned them up. And when they cleaned them up, they basically chased them out of town. That's basically what happened. And then they sort of became the group who started beating on people and things of that sort. So it, on one hand, you clear the scene of Nazis, and then on the other hand, you're not making it a safe place for people, which was a shame because it was, Boston is such a great scene. It still is. I mean, it's not like it used to be, but there was certainly a camaraderie between people who were going to shows. You became friends with everyone. So, it was one of those things. You go to a show and literally you go into like Boston at the Channel, famed club back in the day. Everyone came through there. You name the band, they came through there. And you'd go there and there'd be like, let's say there's 300, 400, 500 fucking kids at a show, and half of them you're walking in, shaking hands with at least, it's that kind of scene. And I'm sure New York is much the same, and I'm sure the other scenes are the same in that regard at some point. But Boston is a scene that we were privileged to grow up in and be a part of a thriving scene that not only extended to the local bands, but obviously national acts. I mean, the national acts came in and people came out, but the local bands at one point, people were diehards, So that's an amazing place to sort of cut your teeth and be a part of that scene. I'm very, very, very proud to still be in it, but to have spent so much time in it at an early point when metal was considered, and punk and hardcore, we were considered pieces of shit in the rest of society. And we managed to bond together and to blossom that scene into what has become everywhere, worldwide. Not saying it's come from Boston, but I'm just saying that's the scene. It had to blossom, and it had to blossom in lots of places for it to be the mega giant that it is now. And I was privy to see that scene blossom and get cultivated and just explode over time.
Yeah, it's a legendary scene. in its own right. And you mentioned what society thought of people who were into this type of music. In an interview this morning, I wrote down you said you guys were maggots, you were outcasts as the metalheads in town.
Oh
That's
yeah.
that sort of thing. Maybe just take us back into your first experience with a band. I know you said that at some point, kind of typical story. You were the guy that didn't have an instrument, so you and your buddies needed a singer. Someone had a mic and a speaker and just plugged in. Maybe take us from that um, into like Infestation, because if I got it correct, there's like Skeletal Onslaught and there's maybe a few other names, and then Infestation is the first band with like original songs and playing shows, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, very close. I mean, we were doing with Skeletal Onslaught. That was the first band I was in, and we were writing our own songs, And it was like a thrashy, thrashy, borderline death metal kind of thing. We were still learning. We were trying to figure out what we wanted to be, who we wanted to be, and obviously. When you've got, I mean, at the time we were listening to a lot of like, Metallica and Overkill and Testament and stuff like that. So a lot of that sort of weaned its way into what we were doing. And I wouldn't say that we were still learning instruments. I was still learning to sing, all those things. And then I was also with a hardcore band called Mindscape at the time. And we were also doing our own stuff. We were both bands. We were doing a little bit of covers, but not out live. It was just more just ham jam kind of stuff. But when both of those bands had broken up, of course I had come down with Infestation. Was they were actually already playing, so it was Mark Brophy and Eric Barabee and Mike Hubbard and Matt Raymond. I had played with Matt and Mark Brophy with Skeletal, and so they had. Once Skeletal had broken up, and we were with Mindscape for I guess maybe a couple of months. And we went through a name change also. Those guys started jamming together. So when that became defunct, they said, "Oh, like you're not doing anything. Why don't you come down and listen to what we've got? We got a bunch of songs right now, 3 or 4 or 5 songs, whatever it was." So I came down. I loved it. I already had familiarity with Mark and Matt, so it was sort of an easy transition to come in. I wanted, we had done demos with both of those other bands, but I obviously wanted to take it to the next level. I really wanted that band to, certainly do demos. We had to, sort of follow the path of every rock or metal band back then. You do your demos and then you start shopping around and see if you can get some label interest. So we had that. That was something that was always at the forefront. We did want to put demos out and then tour and then obviously get a deal. So that we pushed hard. We played a lot of shows. We did radio spots. We honed our skills and both personal and just songwriting and as a unit. And it was very rewarding. I would say that's when it really started to kick in. I always liked this was always something I wanted to do. At some point when I wanted to do it, that was it. I put complete focus towards it. But with Infestation was the first time I think that I felt, okay, we could take this to the next level. And we're starting to really, as a unit, we were gelling. And we were playing a lot of shows in Boston, and we were sort of the band, the go-to band that was, for death metal, us and a few other ones, Delusion and Desolate, a few other ones, Scatter Remnants and things like this along the way that started to come out. But we were the one band among a few that were asked to play all the metal shows, so it was starting. It really was starting to happen for us. It was a great period of time, really.
Okay, and we recommend and talk about a lot of music. So just for the listeners, quickly while we're talking about Infestation, both the Visions of Repulsion 1992 and Conceived 94 demo were re-released as the Antecedent compilation by Redefining Darkness. I guess fairly recently in the last few years. So just if people wanted to look any of that up and check that out, it's out there. Classic old school death metal, especially in this climate where people are revisiting a lot of this material. And if I got it right, something I wanted to ask you about, it sounded kind of fun, honestly, was I guess where you first come across and meet the Cryptopsy guys who would end up becoming good friends of yours long before you joined Cryptopsy. We'll get to that later. It was kind of a keg party show in New Bedford, Massachusetts, back in the day. That
That's right.
sounds like a pretty loose, fun kind of show.
It was awesome, except for the fact that cops came and took the fucking kegs. They came in, honest to God, they came in. We had 10 kegs. And the second the first band comes on, boom, the door kicks open.
Oh,
They
man.
come in and they're like, okay, they take the trolleys, pull out the kegs, and they're like, all right, boys, have fun. Close the door, and away we went. Yeah. It was definitely a loose 10, like a 10 kegger with 10 bands. And and probably $5 in our pockets at the end of the show, and that was fun. It was definitely, and that's actually, like you said, that's where I met the guys from Cryptopsy at the time. I believe they were Gomorrah, and I've gone back and forth with Lord Worm over this. He's like, no, I don't think we were Gomorrah. I was like, man, I'm pretty sure you guys were Gomorrah at that. So one of us is wrong. I'm not sure. I still hold that at that time they were Gomorrah, one show away from becoming Cryptopsy.
Oh, it was a couple of years ago, man. So who knows, man? We'll leave it at that. But and it's like I said, man. I listened to a few of the other interviews you did, and something that's that's very relatable and predictable with underground music, where there's not always a huge budget going on. At a certain point, Lord Worm has to step down from Cryptopsy, and I guess that was maybe about 3 or 4 years after Infestation had broken up, or after you had parted ways with that group.
No, it was actually pretty soon. It was actually within the year. Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, what happened was when I had moved up to Montreal, I had the intention of coming back, whatever it was, every month or every 6 weeks to continue with Infestation. So the goal was to continue it. We were talking about we were writing songs for a new album. So we were going to take I think we were going to take a couple actually of the songs from the demo, one or two. And I think they were actually maybe one song from Conceived, if I remember correctly. And then we were going to take a couple old ones that we hadn't recorded. And then we had written, I want to say 3 or 4 new ones. So we were planning to release a record. So when I made the decision to move up there, obviously the guys were a bit like, man, what's going to happen? I said, no, look, I'm gonna come down. That's it. It's 6 hours away. My family's here. Like, I'll be down. So, but then it just, as it will, I think they, a couple of guys were not feeling it per se, and we disbanded at the, and I guess in hindsight it was okay. But I had the intention of doing that, and I actually felt really fucking terrible when that happened. It was sort of when you that was my baby along with 4 other guys, and we were we loved the band and we loved playing together. So when that was officially disbanded, that hurt, and but shortly after I was asked to once Lord Worm had stepped down, Flo had come to me. I was already friends, obviously friends with Flo, and we go out drinking. And he was like, you know what? He's like, why don't you come down? We're gonna need a new singer. So I said, all right, well, fuck, I'll learn a couple tunes. I'll come down, and that was it. It was I came down. I jammed out 2 songs with them. I don't remember which ones. Slightly Guts was one actually, and I forget what the other one was. Crown of Horns maybe, and. I belted those out, and right away they were like, okay, man, awesome. This is great. You're in. So it was a nice, easy transition. It was really at a good time because I was at that bridge of fuck, now what? I don't have a band. I know tons of musicians up here, but that doesn't equate to being in a band. I was young, I was hungry. I really, like I said, I set my mind to doing big things. I still do. Set my mind to doing big things in music, and I, that has never changed. So having that opportunity to come down, play with those guys, incredible musicians, and then to be welcomed on board was an absolute dream. Yeah.
Okay, and if you don't mind my asking, had they been signed to Century Media prior to you joining, or and was that in any way an issue, like the label saying, "Oh, wait, you guys got a new frontman," or did that come afterward?
That came afterwards.
Okay.
So I was in the band. Oh, geez, I want to say at least a year, maybe longer. And I think what had actually got that ball moving was us playing at the newly reformed now, but at the Milwaukee Metal Festival back in '97 or something like that, somewhere in that range. 98 maybe, I forget. One of those 2 years. So we had played, we had a killer set, and then once we had that set, we started getting lots of offers coming our way, both for shows and for record label interest. So we had talks with pretty much all the, both larger and small metal ones, metal labels, and we decided to go with Century Media Records. We felt they were going to, really propel us in the direction that we wanted to go. So, I do regret signing the deal that we signed because it wasn't a good deal. That's on us. That's not on Century Media. That was on us. They were, for whatever circumstances, whatever the reasons were behind us signing as quickly as we did. It happened. We did. And the 5 of us signed it. So that's, and that's, that's certainly something that has plagued other bands too. But then again, on the other side of the coin, we had a team that at the time, Century Media had a great team that was certainly backing us, and they gave us most things that we needed or wanted. And so my personal experience with Century Media was very positive, to be honest with you. Aside from signing a deal that was certainly way in their favor, but again, like that's not on them. So that's. So I hold nothing but positive feelings about at least working with them at that time. I had great relationships with the people who were in the office, both in Germany and in the States. So yeah, they did a lot of good for us. I'll say that for sure. They did.
All right, and people, people obviously always know that Whisper Supremacy is the first album with you on vocals, but I don't know if people also realize that's the first and only album with Miguel Roy on guitar.
Yeah.
So could you tell me about when he comes on in relation to when you, like, were you guys both the new guy at some point, or how does that happen?
Yeah, we were. Miguel was already there, but not too long before I came in. If I remember correctly, he wasn't there for that long, for sure. He was, he was there for all the writing of the album. And he was there for at least the first US tour that we did. Was he there for the first US tour? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think he was, because I think what we did was we snuck him in to the States to go on that tour. And then I think subsequent ones, there was an issue with him not being able to get into the States legally. So for us to get work visas, there would have been an issue when we were a little bit concerned. I think they were tightening up the ropes in terms of crossing the border and certainly working. We took a chance and we lucked out. To do it again, we weren't feeling that we were going to be able to do that, and because of his unfortunate restrictions, we had to let him go. It was a shame, because Miguel's a fucking great dude and a great guitar player too. Real solid guy, real easy, adaptable, great fucking musician. Great songwriter. He's I love the kid. So it sucked to see him go. And then we started to see, at that point it was we had talked to a few people. I don't remember if a lot of people had come down to try out after he was gone, but we needed another guitar player, and we ended up going with Alex Auburn, of course. And Alex, a great dude too. So it was lose one great dude and gain another great dude and a great musician. So
yeah,
that's one thing. There was no short supply of, was fucking amazing musicians in that band. They were a dream to fucking play with. I'll tell you that.
Well, my next question was going to be about Alex Auburn coming in. Not to take anything away from him in either way, but he would go on to spend, if I got this right, he would go on to spend 12 years in the band, and kind of take the helm when John Levasseur, if I got his name right,
Yeah.
would leave. I think John. We'll get into that. John probably left around the same time as you after, and then you'll beg. But when Alex first came in, looking back now, like reflecting on that, are you surprised, or does it make sense, or could you see it even then that he would take the helm of the guitarist of the band and stay with it for as long as he did?
Yeah, that's a good question. There were times that I thought maybe he would not remain, um, but I think that, and I really think that's just sort of steeped in the fact that he was writing other stuff with he had another project before, and Schism I think was the name of his band before, and so I know he wanted to put a record out from that. Maybe he was, he may have felt at some point as now he's the new guy. I mean, I was the new guy for a while. I was called the new guy, even with the guys. I was the new guy for a long time. So he became the new guy. And so you always wonder, maybe this guy will, maybe he'll bump and go on his solo career or whatever and finish up his records like that. But I was wrong, anytime that I would think about it, that he would. Not to say that I thought on it a lot, but it was certainly something that I said, it's certainly a real possibility that he'd leave. But yeah, I mean, 12 years, I don't know if it's 12 years or not, but he was definitely there for, he was there for another record after. I think he was part writer of the self-titled Cryptopsy record. I might be wrong on that, but I think he was writing some of the stuff on that one. He certainly wrote the ones on the album before that. I think he wrote most of that record actually. So yeah, so I mean, he's a very good guitar player, and he's a metal guy. He's a guy that likes to be. He's a road warrior, road dog. He wants to be on the fucking road. He did anyways back then.
That's a big factor. That'll keep you in the game.
Oh fuck yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Either you love it or it's really no in between. It's not being on the road can't be yeah, it's okay. It's fun. It's either you fucking love it and you do it, or you're just out of the band and you're not doing it. I mean, it's really, that's it. You can try and think you're going to do it. How many guys have you known that have like, oh yeah, I'm going on tour, like 6-7 days in, and they're like, please shoot me. Fucking send me home. Get me out of the shit.
Yeah. So sometimes
not for everyone.
It's not how many paradiddles you do or what label you're on. It's just how much you can tolerate being in a van for hours at a time with these other guys.
That's an absolute fact.
Oh man, that's what it comes down to. All right, well, I appreciate that, and let me ask you one more question. Not to get you to talk about these guys so much, but one more question while we're on Cryptopsy here. Take that question one step back further, because you've known Flo. Is it Monnier? Flo?
Yeah,
Flo Monnier. Again, Long Island. I'm trying my hardest with the pronunciations.
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Flo Monnier. You've known him for a very long time, going back to even before they were called Cryptopsy. I think it's safe to say, looking back from here, that he's kind of kept that project and that brand of Cryptopsy going all this way, and has used it to kind of have his own platform as a drummer and a drum teacher and all these sort of things he's known for. I was just going to ask if in the same way, maybe you could reflect on the Flo you met at that keg party that the cops busted up till the Flo that like continues to be, a world-renowned drummer, helming Cryptopsy even today with a newer lineup.
Yeah, sure. I mean, when I first met him, he, I want to say he was like 17 years old. That kid was phenomenal. He was, at that time, you knew he was going to be an elite drummer in metal if he continued to choose to play, in anything, whatever it was. He was going to be an elite drummer, and is an elite drummer. Back then, at 17 years old, that kid could fly. It was something to see him play, and he was brand new to the band at that time. So I think he had maybe done. He might have had like 3 shows under his belt or something. I don't think it couldn't have been much more than that. He was pretty new to that lineup at that time. And Flo's a good friend of mine. So, I think once I left the band, there was a period of time where we weren't talking as much. That's accurate to say, for no other reason that they had the train was rolling for them. So he was busy. I was busy. I was trying to get myself back on track. So you lose contact with people. It wasn't for any other reason than that, And over the years, we've gotten back together in terms of like talking and having a more not amicable, but we've always been amicable, but more friendly relationship, I guess. Where like I'll text him, he'll text me, and he came to my wife's funeral, which I fucking respect the hell out of that. We hadn't really been talking much before that, and but it doesn't matter. All that shit transcends. The friendship transcends over whatever fucking shit happened in the past and stuff like that. And I love that guy. I respect him dearly. Great drummer, consummate professional. I don't think you'll find a guy that has a bigger work ethic than him. I know that from experience. That he wants to be one of the best, if not the best drummer out there, and he fucking strives for it. And he is an absolute elite drummer. I'd pair him off against anyone. Seriously.
Wow. All right. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear you guys are still friends throughout this this whole life of metal. Again, like not to pair him off or compare him to anyone, but the Canadian scene, and I know you've had a little bit of interaction. You've did a guest appearance later on in their career for Cataclysm, who've always been associated maybe in some ways in that old school Canadian scene as some of the big dogs. What I'm getting at here is drummer Nick Miller, who was with Cataclysm, I think briefly, only for maybe an album or two. He's another drummer that had a very interesting style for that era of death metal that kind of like transcended in terms of speed and the tempos he would keep. Did you ever interact with them, with Cataclysm, while he was in the band, or get an opportunity to see him live or anything?
No, I don't know Nick. At least I don't. The name, definitely not. Maybe I've met him over the years, but that's not a name that's familiar with me.
Fair enough. I was just trying to get at if maybe there was any cross pollination in the region with because to have two drummers with such remarkable styles, maybe it's just some of that Canadian mountain water coming off, man. I don't know.
You know what? We had a. This is a question that's actually come up a lot over the years. Is why Quebec? Why the province? Why are there so many gifted musicians that come out of there, like guys who are you never find a band that's a 1 2 3 4 band that comes out of paint by number bands out of Quebec. You just don't find that. And someone had brought it up and said, I forget who the hell it was. I think it might have been Lord Worm, actually, in an interview that we had done, and I think he nailed it by saying that Quebec has been one of those places that have always embraced 60s and 70s prog rock. So it is something that is somehow transcended into the stream of Quebec musicians over at least someone's the fathers of the people who were playing, and then them starting to learn. They grew up listening to a lot of these like Quebec ones, like Harmonium, and there's a stack of like progressive Quebec bands, and then you've got how many started to come out, Voivod, total game changer, Dead Brain Cells, total game changer. These bands when they first came out were doing shit that no one else on the planet was doing, and I think it was all steeped in the fact that prog rock is so well loved and respected in Quebec that they were listening to it from their parents or their grandparents or whoever the hell it was that was listening to that stuff, that style, and it just has always been there. And I think there's something to say about that. I think it's much more than people stuck inside their house 7 months a year because it's so goddamn cold that all you can do is play your instruments and try and get better and better and better. Okay, fine. Is it something to do with it? Perhaps. But I really do think it's more in line with the type of music that's been accepted widely and for so long in Quebec that and still continues to be a much loved style and genre of music that people have just embraced it at an early age and grew up listening to it, and that's why you've got some of these phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal, gifted players.
Hmm. To this day, you've got some amazing young talent too. In addition to the legacy acts coming out of
Absolutely.
Quebec and other parts north of me here. Um, and when you just rounding up the Cryptopsy talk here, when you joined Cryptopsy, and I imagine when Century Media comes into the picture and Whisper Supremacy is released, there's like a step up in touring. Was that your first, like with Infestation, I know you guys were giving it a push, but with Cryptopsy, was it like a different level of touring and traveling that you hadn't seen yet?
Oh yeah, big time. That's really where it took off. I mean, with Infestation, I mean, all the bands, back from Skeletal to Mindscape, we were playing shows, we were playing local shows. It was, we got into Boston with both those bands, so we were playing. We get to play the Channel, like I was saying, and a few other places that were sort of the harder to get into places. So we were already doing that, but I think with Infestation was the first time that we started to play outside of just New England per se, or just outside of Boston. So we did play Vermont and obviously New Hampshire, and we got to go up to Maine. We played in New York, and so there was and we had plans to do an East Coast tour. It fell through, but we were at that point when it was just about to start to happen. Once I joined Cryptopsy, excuse me, playing through, there's so many places to play in Quebec. So a lot of the focus early on was playing all over Quebec, and I mean fucking all over. It's a huge province, and there are many, many, many towns that the province loves. It's the mecca of metal. In North America, absolutely. Perhaps in the world. I mean, it's certainly one of the what I find one of the absolute best places to play is in North America for sure is Quebec, and all over too. So it's not just section to Montreal or Quebec City, or it's fucking every town you go to. You're guaranteed that kids are going to come out to the shows. They really do support it. So we were doing a lot of those shows, and then we were doing some off. At first, I was booking some shows in New England and New York and a few of these places. So the East Coast, the Northeast, was sort of covered in the States from me. We did have a manager at the time that was booking some shows in Quebec and all around Quebec. He had the market down at that time. And then, of course, once the album came out, then it was all balls out. I mean, we were fucking touring all the time. We did Europe a few times. We went to Japan. We went through the States and Canada. We had some long tours. I think it was the tour that we did with Candaria and when the hell was that? I think it was for Then You'll Beg, actually. And we did 6 weeks on that tour. That was the most we did. 6 weeks. So I think we had done at some point or close to it. We had done 46 shows or 45 shows in 48 days. I mean,
wow.
It's just like intense, brutal, hardest job I've ever had, most rewarding job I've ever had. It's a job. It is a job. It's a job you love, but it's definitely a job. At that point, you're doing, you're even if you're on stage for an hour a night. I mean, it's grueling. It's for sure. Anyone who's toured will agree with that. It is amazing. But 45 shows in 48 days. That was incredible.
That's a lot, man. Yeah. And I mean, kind of segueing off of it. Well, I wanted to ask you, because you've been very candid about your experience recording vocals for And Then You'll Beg, and I did want to touch on that before we move on from Cryptopsy. But maybe segueing into that, did you find it was hard to protect your voice playing that many shows in a row, like traveling, being in a band? Did you come up with new techniques, or would you have maybe even any tips for aspiring death metal vocalists, like in that realm?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You definitely, it is, without a doubt, a learning experience on multiple levels. One of the things I mean, you always hear about it and stuff, and one-off shows, two-off, three, whatever it is, like a weekend worth of shows. I wasn't so concerned about it, but when you're talking, this amount of shows, or 4 weeks out on the road or something like that, what I would do is I would get tea. It's a classic tea and honey. So I would, after the show, I'd have some, dump a bunch of honey in some tea, and that coats your throat. It does help. A lot of vitamins. I used to take vitamin C and vitamin D and a few other things, oregano oil, and what's the shit from salmon? The
Oh, was it omega oil or?
Yeah, omega threes. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Omega threes. So I would take that stuff in hopes that it would keep the cold at bay, because you're out on the road. It's a constant go. You're constantly going. You're probably, in my case, I'm definitely having drinks after the show. It's probably smoking a little bit after the show. Never before. I never did any of that shit before shows. So I mean, it can, your immune system will break down. You're around a bunch of guys. There's always someone getting sick on the road. So you're trying to stay away from that. You're trying to, take the vitamin C's and pounding those back and stuff like this. So yeah, for the most part, I think all that stuff helped. I did get, there were 2 times on tour, and both times it happened was on a US tour. Once in Denver and once in Collingwood, Ontario, that I had lost my voice. And it was because I was sick, and I had been I got sick on the one that was in Denver. That show, I was sick for like a week. So I was belting. We had 7 shows during that week. So, you're fighting through it, and you're in such a, because you're so in the pocket by then, because you're playing every night. So everything's sort of clockwork anyway. So the voice kind of goes along with it too. So even if you're sick, you still manage to pull it off until you can't, and it has happened. I had to cancel that show for myself. I didn't play. The band played, and we had other singers come up, other vocalists come up that were there from other bands, and they came up and sang some songs. And then the one in Collingwood, it was at the end of the tour, and I got sick a few days before, and I had lost my voice completely. And the next show was a huge show. We were headlining in Toronto. And that show was I think we were headlining over Opeth, which was surprising. Opeth was just at Blackwater Park, I think, at that point. So it was kind of surprising that we were headlining that show, to be honest with you. And we wanted that show. That was obviously a marquee show. So we wanted to make sure that we didn't fuck that up. So we took because I was sick for the last 5 days or 4 days prior to that Collingwood show. We took the liberty to say, okay, why don't we have you sit, and we're going to play an instrumental set. And that's what we did. And it paid off, because the next night I felt better, and we had an amazing show there. Yeah. Toronto's one of those places that, obviously you want to put your best foot forward anywhere, any place you play. But that Toronto's it's a mega city, and it's an important city to play, and to be on that show, the last show of the tour, it just made sense to step back and give my voice a rest. And it happens. Sometimes it happens. I think every singer's gone through it at some point or another. And it sucks. You don't want it to ever happen, but when it happens, you gotta perform. And the only reason I didn't for both those times is because my voice was wasted. I got zero. I had nothing, no force, no nothing. It was basically coming out as voiceless, if you will. So tough to make those decisions, but fuck, it happens, and you move on, and that's it.
Yeah, 100%, man. That's just part of what a lot of musicians go through. Not just vocalists too, man. Other musicians go through that too, with the use of their hands and their feet in different ways.
Right.
That's part of the game. And like I said, segueing into that, I've heard you be very candid in other interviews about going into the recording of And Then You'll Beg, also being sick and having to do all of your vocal takes on that record, feeling under the weather.
Yeah, I was more than under the weather. I had the flu.
Mm.
So and then during the recording of it, I had the flu, and then the recovery afterwards. So blowing out, nearly blowing out the voice and having no voice to begin with. That was without a doubt the most challenging experience I've had in the studio, and it sucks because we worked very hard for that. Look, people love that record, and that's great, And I listened to it, and there's parts of it I'm really okay with, and then there's parts I hear it, and I'm just like, and I remember the difficult, the multiple takes to try to get the grain the way I wanted it, and having to take fuck, man, sometimes it happens, and we had a lot of money that was already put into that record at the time. Century Media gave us quite a substantial amount to record that, and we were on our last week at that point. Before Mixdown, we were on our last week. There was no other time to do it but then. And Alex went through the same thing. When Alex was going to do his backups, he was sick too. And I remember telling him, I'm like, he's like, I can't do this. I'm going to not I don't want to record these parts. I need, whatever, 2 or 3 days off. And I remember telling him, I'm like, fuck, man, I needed 2 or 3 days off too. But I powered through it, find it in you and power through it. And he did. He fucking did a great job, But as a vocalist in that circumstance, you do the best you can, and I hear it throughout the record. But yeah, it's okay. I think that at the end, there was an interview. Someone had asked me. I think it might have been Matt McGachy who had asked me if I had a chance to go back and re-record that record, would I do it? And I said, I think I said at the time, maybe 40% or something like that, or 30% of it. But in hindsight, I thought on that answer after, and I thought on it actually for a while afterwards. And I don't think that's the right answer. I think the album is what it is, and I wouldn't change anything. It was the experience that album brought forth, and whatever experience whatever is happening in your life, if that's what it is, that's the experience, and that's it. And to go back and wish you could fucking redo parts or redo this, or the proverbial issue of any singer or any musician that listens to it and says, "Oh fuck, I could go back and redo that part, or redo this, or change these riffs, or whatever it is that they had, whatever path they head down in that regard." I don't believe in that. I think it is what it is. You release it as it is, and in the moment, I think I got caught up and said, sure, it'd be cool to redo. But now in hindsight, after rethinking about this, I did think about it a few times. I was like, no, that's not the right answer. The right answer is the album is what it is. And I accept that. And lots of people across the fucking world have accepted it. People love that record. And I do too. I do. So no, I'm okay with how it worked out. That was how that experience was to be laid out. And I'm certainly accepting of it.
Okay, man. I appreciate that, man. And it's just something to go back and listen to. Like you said, from the listener's perspective, we never know the nuances of what's going on behind the scene, but you'll always have your own recollection. Now, with Akurian, even though Coma Cluster Void kind of comes before that, maybe in some of our perception, Akurian was actually dates back to shortly after you left Cryptopsy.
No, it was a while actually after it was years. It was years after that, because I had done a project with my wife and Mike Hubbard from Warhorse, drummer, and from Infestation 2.
Okay.
And another friend of ours that we're doing at my house, I had a studio. So we were doing a project. We get together every weekend, and not every weekend, I don't know, once a month anyways. Mike would come up from New Hampshire, and we'd get together for a weekend and write songs. So it was more like a psychedelic metal rock kind of thing. Those songs, I love these songs. And I remember showing a few people in the industry afterwards about what we were doing. And because it's not anything that was relatable to what I had done with Cryptopsy or what Mike or what anyone had done with any other project, because it is definitely a rock based project with metal stuff. There's certainly metal influences and lots of heavy stuff in there as well. But it's kind of an eclectic mix of styles, from 70s psychedelic to straight up death metal. And I'm like immensely proud of those fucking songs. No one's, my friends have heard it. A few other people have heard it. A few people in the industry have heard it, and I just don't think people were really prepared for that. When I presented this to a few friends that I knew from labels, and I showed them, hey, this is what I'm doing now, I think they were like, oh, well, where's the technical, fucking 5, 6, 8 signatures, where's all that stuff? This is like rock, or, that kind of thing. You're not always singing heavy and stuff like this. So, and that experience is really, it's a project that opened my doors in terms of an artist to try things that I had never tried before. And that is, things like singing rock songs, and, mostly it's been just metal or, from thrash stuff to death metal to, extreme music, and to actually go and do something like this and actually present it as, hey, this is what I'm doing now. I think a lot of people were just like, not what we're looking for. This is, we're looking for you to come out and fucking scream your fucking throat out, which is fine. And I get that. But for me as an artist, I don't want to be pigeonholed into anything, Sure. I obviously there is a strength behind that because of the years that I've, been doing that for, and the albums that I've been on as a result. But I'm not, I don't look at myself as a one-trick pony, and I know the other band members in that do not also do not think of themselves as one-trick ponies, and so we were trying to do something that was very different, and we certainly succeeded. Someday I'll release these. I have the intent to release them just myself. Just put them on a website, an e-commerce store, and sell it as is. It'll happen, but it's certainly far from what people would think of me doing, and certainly think of what Mike would do. Mike Hubbard and my wife and and JP. So.
Okay, I appreciate that, because I had heard you talk a little bit about that, and I was going to ask you if that's going to eventually see some sort of release. So we kind of got around to that. And then, but I do have it right that Acurian kind of does predate Coma Cluster Void in some way, or at least around the same time, but it just took up until recently for you guys to come out with the album.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, sorry, we were talking about that, and I got fucking way off subject.
No, because that's yeah. I think that's an important and an interesting part of your history too, because like you said, it's completely unexpected, and it also goes to show how as an artist, especially in something like death metal, extreme metal, we can get pigeonholed. And if you wanted to say make a rock album or a hip hop album or a jazz album for a guitarist or something, you even trying to break through in those type of scenes you're now the metal guy, it could be tough. So I appreciate you talking about that a little bit. But yeah, I wanted to get into I guess Acurion and also Coma Cluster Void, and just how those two projects kind of, because they're, I guess neither one is on kind of a conventional timeline for different reasons.
Yeah, it's true. With Acurion, Rob and I have been friends for years, Rob Milley and I. So when he had approached me, we were out for lunch, and he was like, he's like, I think at the time he was on hiatus at the time with Neuraxis. So he was like, fuck, I get some songs, and I'd like to run them by you if you're interested. For me, of course, Rob's a incredible fucking musician, incredible guitarist, great dude, one of my best friends. And he when he brought those riffs to my house, and it was like instantly, it was like, okay, you start feeding off of those riffs, and you're throwing lines out there. I remember having a couple of, just one lines, just to work in a few of the, okay, this works here, this works there, and that's how it starts. It literally starts from a couple of riffs, and here's an idea, and then literally 2 sentences, and then you build, all of a sudden you're building a song around that, and that's literally how that had happened. So Rob and I were I want to say we had put 3 rough songs together, and we had all at the time we had Ollie do some drums. Ollie from Cataclysm had laid down some drums for it, or had done programming for 2 of the songs. And we had a 3rd song that we were working on. All 3 songs that we actually ended up using for the album, but we of course made multiple changes. And but when he had done those tracks for us, we were like, okay, well this is great, but obviously we need a drummer, and obviously we need a bass player. So Rob went to Tommy. He suggested Tommy McKinnon, and he suggested Ollie Pinard, obviously, and both guys who he had gone on tour with Neuraxis. So he was very familiar with them. And so we brought those guys in and started jamming. And that's really where Curian started to take place, outside of just the 2 of us hashing out some riffs and trying to piece the songs together. And I think all 3 of those songs, I had lyrics pretty much mostly set for all 3 before Tommy and Ollie came down. And then from there it went, 7 years, almost 8 years before we actually released the record. But during that period of time, somewhere in there early on, I got a message from both Gene and Sylvia Hines, Gene Strider and Sylvia Hines, from Coma Cluster Void. They had reached out to me through, of all places, LinkedIn, and said, "Hey, we got some songs, and we like your vocals, your vocal style, and we want to see if you'd be interested." So I've had that happen before over the years, where people, and generally speaking, I usually thanks, for that type of project, I like to be in the same room with the musicians that I'm playing with. It's the old school way. I just love that. That's where I feel a lot, where the magic really happens.
Mm-hmm.
But when Gene and Sylvia sent me what they had, I don't know, there was a couple of pieces of songs from CCV early on, probably the same shit they sent you. You can't pull yourself out of this equation.
I was getting ready. I didn't want to cut you off, but just for clarity for the listeners, I'm credited in Metal Archives as being a part of Coma Cluster Void, but I was never on any of the releases. Very early on, they did contact me, and respectfully, I had to bow out because I was at a place. First of all, the long distance recording just didn't work for me at that point. I didn't have a setup in my house. I didn't really have a friend with a studio. It just didn't really wasn't compatible with my life, not even as a matter of preference, but just out of practicality to be in a band that was like internet based at that point. And I think I was also biting off a little bit more than I could chew at that point with the bands I was in with people that were in New York, let alone something else out of, I was just biting off more than I could chew, and I had to kind of own up to that at a certain point and respectfully back out. But you, on the other hand, did end up going on to record material with them. And figure out, unlike Caveman Will, you figured out how to punch the buttons and send the files and do it.
Look, man, thankfully I had some experience with that with the Mobus project. That's really where I started to figure out a lot of that stuff, working with the different software and miking things and et cetera, all the sort of things that go along with that. But that, make no bones about it, it was still a fucking daunting experience at first, because it is new territory. You're doing stuff that's, the same people aren't in the room. I still to this day have never met Gene and Sylvia, none of the guys in the band, or girls in the band. I've never met any of these people. So this project is spanned 2 albums and a 3rd one that's being worked on now. And I have had 2 separate occasions where I've spoken to Gene via like what we're doing, the Zoom, or I think it was probably Facebook or something, and FaceTime, and that's it. I mean, so we've, all that to say is that I've, come from a long standing point of, never seen myself do something like that, just being in the room with someone, and then getting to a point where I can fucking actually record all my stuff and send the files and have this project that spans a globe with, people from, everywhere that's different, from New York to Oregon, to Germany, to, the Las Vegas. And it's unbelievable. And I love those albums dearly, because I felt at the time, and still feel right now at this point, I feel that they're sort of groundbreaking riffs and groundbreaking ideas. I think Jean is an absolute mastermind. She's just writing some elite shit that not a lot of bands are pulling off. That's for sure. There are bands that are playing some really crazy, chaotic things. But I find Jean is playing those chaotic things, but still manages to keep everything in a nice little package that, you still got your grooves and you still, so she might be playing multiple things that are going on at times. Sometimes you listen to the, like some of those songs, especially on like you listen to on Mind Cemeteries. And I listen to some of those riffs, and there's so many layers of guitars over that. And even though it all sounds like, is this even on time? Of course it is. It's all on time in some way, some weird abstract way. Everything's on time. And she is an absolute fucking master at putting these songs together. So to be a part of that project for as long as I have too, I'm over the moon about that stuff. Always have been, and still. I even though it's not my ideal way to record, it is certainly an experience that I cherish, and I certainly want to finish this third album up, and we'll see from there. See what happens after that.
All right, that's it. That's good to know, and good to get a little update about that. And for the listeners who aren't familiar, highly recommended, especially for people who might be familiar with Mike's work in Cryptopsy, those two albums in particular. Not that Coma Cluster Void sounds like Cryptopsy, but if you can appreciate the technicality therein, I think your ears will be able to appreciate some of what's going on there too, man. It's extremely interesting and exciting progressive music. It's like you'd have to call it metal at the end of the day, but it's really pushing the boundaries.
And I will say, for the record, if I could just jump in there for a second, I feel that had you been able to be on that album, it would have been fucking unbelievable, because your voice would have fucking meshed perfectly with that, and I stand by that. And I would have at the time. I remember when they first brought that to my attention, that they were bringing you on board. I was like, okay, fucking right. This is going to be one hell of a. So I really did look forward to working with you on that. Just letting that be known.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah, and I gotta own up to that, man. I think that was probably around 2000, maybe like 15, 16-ish.
That's right. That seems right.
And yeah, not that I got all my shit together now, but I was really, things were kind of a mess back then, and I wish I could have pulled it off, man. But I was just, because earlier today doing the research for this interview, I was reflecting on that a little bit, and I was like, man, because now, having Tom, who produces the podcast for me behind the scenes, and I just have a little bit more access nowadays to doing things like that. So it just wasn't the right time or the right place, man. But I appreciate that. And who knows, man, maybe we'll be able to get it together, either invite you into one of my projects or the other way around. The other way around before it's all over, man.
Awesome, man. Anytime.
I always have a lot of irons in the fire, as do you, because you've been very generous with your time, and I hate to get out of here without really bumping this Acurian 2020 Come Forth to Me album on Redefining Darkness Records. Like I said, as we go through, we try to recommend music for the listeners. So Acurian, that's Akurion, if I got it right, Acurian, with members of Neuraxis, Cattle Decapitation, and Ali's actually a current member of Cryptopsy, and ironically enough. So just like if you can go on the Metal Archives yourself, and check it out. This is a pedigree of a band. 2020, you guys put out Come Forth to Me on Redefining Darkness. Still a fresh album, very interesting music. Not necessarily what people might be expecting if they're familiar with those bands. But that's not to say it's not as exciting or dynamic as those bands. Just from my perspective, I heard a little bit more maybe of that kind of experimental dissonance and even some doom creeping in there, man. It's tough. It's tough to pin the band down. I'll say that. So I just wanted to maybe let you talk about that album and what went into it, and so some of the they took like 7 or 8 years, right? So I mean there might be a little bit to speak of there.
Absolutely. That record, that's one of those records that, I always say that when we got together, it was the goal was to put a record out. It wasn't even to play live. It was nothing like that. It was to put a record out, something that we were happy with. We were excited about. We felt, great about. So there was not that you ever go into it hoping that people are going to love it or, whatever the case is. I mean, you always want people to dig what you're doing, but this was a record that I would say that we put all that shit aside, and it was just literally, let's write a record, what we want to do, and keep it outside the box in many different ways. And I'll explain why. First being something that wasn't going to be solely what we've done in the past. We wanted to add lots of different dynamics to the record. That was something that we went in fully recognizing what we wanted to do in advance. The other piece to that puzzle was something that we wanted to do was to record it live. We did not want to go in and do track by track by track. We wanted to record this live. So that meant a ton of practice. We were in the zone. By the time we recorded that record, we were at the I'd say the pinnacle of, at that time, of playmanship at that point, because we were practicing all the time, and because we were going in to record those very technical songs. It was very, they're progressive. Yes, there is, there's some dissonance. There is definitely some doomy stuff in there too. There is definitely some nods to what we had done in the past. You will hear some Neuraxis kind of riffing in there, and some Cryptopsy riffing and vocals and things like this. But it was certainly not with that intent. We did not once say we want to write these songs in any fashion that was going to be a nod to what we were doing. It just naturally progresses, I think, in that direction. But when we had already said we didn't want to have, clicks on the drums. We wanted natural drum sound. We wanted, in the same room, a unit, putting those songs, those, very complex songs, and having those songs done live. And we succeeded. We did it. We recorded those tracks over a weekend in our jam space. And we just divided the room up and went through and fucking banged those songs out for 2 days and took the best tracks. And then we did overdubs after, of course. I mean, there's always going to be some overdubs, but I mean, what your bread and butter of that, your bones, you strip everything else away, and that's us playing live. All the main vocal tracks are live. Everything's live. And then, like I said, we of course went back over and did, overdubs to strengthen it where it needed to be strengthened and stuff like this. So I mean, we had fucking ton of ideas that we wanted to add. That you can't do when you're doing the basic track, the rhythm tracks and all that stuff. So solos and whatever else we wanted to add, and the length between from that 7 to 8 year period of time, there were quite a few contributing factors to why the length was so excessive. Rob lost his dad. I lost my wife. Ollie was playing with Cryptopsy. I think he was just starting to get in with Cattle Decap. So he's one of the most fucking busiest guys in the industry you'll ever see.
How do you play for Cryptopsy and Cattle Decap at the same time? That's
unbelievable. It's incredible. Right. He's fucking, this kid's like, he's got to be on the road all the time like that. Yeah. And he's like the hot to trot fucking bass player, right? For years now. He's been, and with reason, because he is a phenomenal fucking bass player, so there's a reason people are seek him out. And so just being, just think of that, like Cryptopsy and, so try juggling that around with, with writing an album with Kieran. So it took some time to finally get out. And the fucking bummer about that is that when we released the record, we had everything was done. We said, okay, we're releasing it whenever the fuck it was, April. I can't even tell you when it was. I think it was somewhere in April, right before COVID hit, or right after. I think it came out, and COVID was just in its first week or 2 weeks in. So on one hand, we were like, well, this could either work really well for us because people are home and people are going to want new music because there's no shows, people stuck in their houses. Maybe there's going to be people who are going to gravitate towards albums that are coming out during this period of time. And it just wasn't the case because we weren't able to move as much as we were hoping to. Not that we're dying to move fucking records, but I just don't think we had a lot of press. We had people who were into it. I think that the metal scene generally really liked the record. And, but it just didn't translate to volume of sales, and that's how the business goes, man. So I think a lot of people unfortunately don't know the band. I mean, that's, like I said, I guess you could say it's kind of in line with how we had initially gone into it. Was this is for us. I look at that record as a record for four guys that spent a lot of time putting it together. I had my wife Jen sang on the record too. We had lots of guest musicians on there, so it wasn't just the four of us. We really had plotted everything out where everything was down to shit every fucking moment on that album. What we wanted, we knew. We went into it very well prepared. We after we had recorded everything, we knew exactly who we wanted on the record, and we got it all done. And I'm beyond fucking proud of that record. Really am.
As you should be, man. And I would just say again for the listeners, we strongly suggest everyone check out AKURION, Akurian's 2020 album, Come Forth to Me, on Redefining Darkness Records. That, with what you just said now, last question about that is: do you guys play live? Are there plans to play live? I know the other members have a busy schedule. You yourself, I'm sure, have other things going on.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a project that was a studio project. We kind of, when we had presented the project, anytime we presented the project to anyone, it was always, it's a studio album. We're not looking to play live. We did have a couple of opportunities that came our way. And I think at the time, the amount of time it would take to get back into playing shape at the time after the album, I think once we finished the record, we didn't play again. So the last time that we got together was as the four of us playing in the same room was when we recorded that. And that's literally the last time we played. We never played again after that. We did get together to do, all the obviously we were all there when we added all the stuff on, but we did not get together a single time after that. So by the time the interest for shows started coming around, and there was only a couple that I think we had a few. There was maybe like 3 or 4 that we were just like, no, we're not interested. It just made no sense. And then there was maybe 2 shows that came our way that we were like, that could be interesting. And then it just didn't make, I hate to say it, but it didn't make financial sense for us to put all that work back in to get back into sound playing shape, to go to said place and to make said amount that wasn't really representative to what we felt would warrant that kind of work. And yeah, we weren't going to go in the red, is my point. We weren't going in the red for a show. So it just never materialized. Yeah. And I think we were okay with that. I think in hindsight, certainly would have been fun to play. And I think we would have fucking slayed live. I think we did, certainly the pedigree in the band. Like these are all incredible musicians. The 3 of them are fucking unbelievable. Now, Tommy's the guy's an incredible drummer, and Rob, obviously great guitarist, Holly, and so I know we would have laid it down. We would have laid waste to wherever we played, but it just, it didn't happen. And I don't at all think about it like, what if? Yeah, it's fine.
Well, yeah, you can't look at things like that, man. Especially not in underground metal, especially not, man. Nothing's promised in underground metal. But that being said, saying nothing's promised underground metal. Before I let you off the hook, Mike, what? Or I'll say it like this: is there anything you would like to plug or promote coming up, or anything fans of you as an artist should look out for coming in 2023?
Shit, man, I got right now I'm afforded a lot of opportunities right now, some of which I can say, and some of which are going to be news that I'll have to come back on and talk to you about.
Fair enough.
So there is some shit that's coming, and I'm fucking extremely excited about. The news will come out sometime in the next few months, I would say. But right now for like musical projects, Coma Cluster Void, I know we were going to finish up the 3rd album. We've recorded 2. We do 2 songs or 3. 2 songs, I think, and there was a 3rd song that Jean had sent us, but we haven't laid tracks down for it yet. I think she just sort of showed us what's to come, and she usually will make she'll refine some things. So I assume that record is still going to be on, and we'll finish that record off. I have the other another project with Matt Barabee and Alex Hebert and Pat Hamlin from Gorguts, Matt Barabee from Terramobile, and that project is going to be a name change. But that right now there's 4 songs. There's 5 songs for the album. The 5th song I'm gonna finish up the recording for this. This is a delay, and this delay is solely on me. These guys are champions to fucking still hang on to this because I'm late on this. But the later the better, because it's going to be a fucking killer record. We will be changing the name. I don't know what the name change is going to be, but we'll have a 5-song EP that's going to come out from that, and that's some incredibly heavy shit, man. There is a lot of dissonance on there, but there's also some incredible breakdowns, and these guys are incredible musicians. So be on the lookout for that. Right now, I'm working on some. I'm helping Necrotic Mutation with Rob. Actually, Rob Milley has joined them with Jan Thiel and obviously Seb Croteau and Chuck Tremblay. Though that's the lineup that it is now, and I'm helping with some lyrics from there. I'm writing a book right now. I'm putting that together. I'm compiling lyrics and poems and all sorts of. So, man, I got a fucking ton of shit going on. It's good.
Wow.
I love it.
Wow.
Yeah, fuck yeah, man. It's keep busy and immerse myself in any kind of artistry I can possibly do. Absolutely.
That is great, man. So people definitely should look out for your name on the metal blogs and social medias of the world for these upcoming projects. And the final question that I always try to get out of everybody before I let you off the hook is, can you please recommend for me and the listeners one older and one newer music release, whether it's an album, a demo, or EP, metal, or any other genre of music, just something from a little bit back in the day and something from the last few years, just two pieces of music to recommend to people and why they're important to you.
Ooh, shit. Okay, I'm going to say this one right now because I have it here and I've been listening to it. Boom. Fucking come on.
He's holding. He's just for the listeners. He's holding up a vinyl copy of Black Sabbath, Heaven and Hell, just within reach this entire interview, apparently.
Yeah, and that's a mega one that any Sabbath really, but with Dio, Dio's my favorite vocalist, so
okay.
I just love that. And I'm going to show this one here too, which no one will see, but this one is it's called Doc Mark Does Christmas 2020. I just borrowed this from a friend of mine. This is a brand new one. It's a Christmas album that I'm listening to in fucking February, January, whatever. Yeah, we're in January. So this is Mark Lanigan doing Christmas songs, but some of his own songs and some like classics like Oh Holy Night, the good ones. And aside from like Nat King Cole doing Christmas songs, which is maybe the only Christmas album I like, this album is fucking amazing. It's amazing.
Wait a minute. I'm going to be stupid here. Who's Mark Lanigan? Okay,
Mark Lanigan is he was the vocalist for the Screaming Trees.
Okay,
he was with the Mark Lanigan Band, and he's got one of those whiskey deep voices. He's a singer-songwriter. He's got a stack of records on his own, and he's got a ton of shit outside of that, and guest spots with Cult of Luna, and he was singing with Queens of the Stone Age, and he's just one of those guys that everyone has gravitated towards because he's got incredible lyrics, great voice, great persona, wild fucking crazy guy. And this record is phenomenal. It's if this doesn't make you, it doesn't make me weep, but if it doesn't make some of you weep, it's one of those kind of records, man. It's don't think of it as a Christmas album. It's really a somber, very dark release with Christmas connotations. But that's about it. It's a very dark record.
All right, man. Wow, rattling off the. I like how your vinyl collection is like always within reach during this interview, man. You were just.
Oh hell yeah! I got them all around me.
Sometimes people got to stop and take a minute to think for that question, man. But you rattled. I like the Dark Mark Christmas album. And the Black Sabbath, Heaven and Hell. That's great. I don't have it within reach, but I was at shout out to Record Reserve, our local record store here in town. We interviewed Timmy, the owner, on an older episode of the show. I bought Black Sabbath, Sabotage on 12-inch vinyl today. It's like some sort of reissue, whatever gram vinyl, but I had to splurge a little bit, man. So I got that, and I have Sabbath Bloody Sabbath on vinyl now, man. On new vinyl. I have a copy of Master of Reality that looks like somebody was I don't know what they were doing off of it back in the day, but it's all messed up, man.
I still got an original of that. Funny story about that, actually, if you got time. But
go ahead, yeah.
Master of Reality. When I was a kid and I was sick. My mother's like, "Oh, I'm going to whatever Stewart's or whatever fucking department store." I knew that record was there. I'd seen it the last time I was there. So I'm like, okay. She's like, "What can I get you? You're not feeling well." I was like, "Shit, you want to get me a record? Oh, sweet. How about Master of Reality?" So she goes and gets it. She comes home, and on the back of that particular record, so this must have been, I was young. So she on the back of it, it's After Forever, and it's would you like to see the Pope on the end of a rope? Do you think he's a fool? She sees that line. She comes back and tosses the record over to me. She's like, "This is here. You want this shit?" I don't think I didn't read those lyrics on the back. I'm dying laughing. I'm like, as a kid, I'm like, yeah, that's nothing. But of course, it has nothing to do with what she thought it did, obviously, and she just saw the words, those two lines. And sort of went ballistic on it. Still bought me the record. Came back with it, and the rest is history. So,
wow, that's funny because as a kid, I always remember listening to, and like that song kind of confused me because a lot of Black Sabbath songs were more about like opening your mind to God or opening your mind to spiritual. It wasn't like After Forever, especially like that was more of a sarcastic line. It's just funny how it was misinterpreted, man. But I guess that's the classic story with Black Sabbath, man. The parents don't understand. Wow. So, Mike, I really appreciate your time tonight, giving us your story the way you have, man. I'm sure the listeners enjoyed it. I know I did. And again, I'm just going to plug one more time that Akurion, Akurion, Akurion 2020, Come Forth to Me is the name of the album on Redefining Darkness Records. That band, of course, in addition to Mike DiSalvo, featuring guys who are famous for having played in Neuraxis, Cattle Decapitation, and a current member of Cryptopsy as well. I strongly urge the listeners to check that out and keep their ears and eyes peeled for your projects that you're working on coming up later this year. Mike, any parting words for fans of your music and listeners of our show?
Oh, fuck. Look, Will, I just want to thank you anyways. We'll start right there. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I love doing these, and when it's with a guy that I respect as much as I do for you, this is an absolute honor. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the compliment, Mike. Right back at you, man. I appreciate it, man. And we'll be in touch. And maybe we'll have you back on again another time, man, if you're not sick of it. Maybe we'll just talk hockey and pro wrestling for an hour one night.
Done and done.
I know. I'm not going to steal content, like I said, but that Juice Pro Wrestling podcast, they got I think they're the one with a clip of you talking about Brutus, the Barber Beefcake.
That's it, yeah.
Having a little family dinner with you at some point, man. But again, I'm not going to steal their content, man, but that was awesome.
Yeah, totally, yeah. I've been on that show a few times, and fuck, I love those guys. They're great.
Fun podcast. Yeah, I'm not in competition. We're all this is like the underground with the podcasting. Yeah. It's all good, man. But Mike, thank you very much, brother.
Thank you. Cheers.